at BCP AAPS Student Chapter. I welcome you all for today's webinar, which is on the topic of how technology is transferring drug discovery and fueling a precision medicine strategy by none other than Dr. Nimita Limaye. So there'll be a short Q&A session at the end. And I now call upon the chairperson of BCP AAPS Student Chapter, Atharu Bhattu, to share a short overview about our chapter.
Good evening, everyone. This is Atharva Bhattu. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Athar. You are.
Okay, thank you. So, Bombay College of Pharmacy, American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists Student Chapter is the second AAP student chapter outside of US. And the chapter was virtually inaugurated by esteemed dignitaries Dr. Andy Wick, Dr. B. Suresh, Dr. Vinod Shah, and Mr. Ajit Singh. I'm very happy to announce that this 11th of June, we will mark the first 1 year anniversary. In the last 1 year tenure, we have managed to do a lot of technical events, and one such event was a webinar arranged, the webinar on role of artificial intelligence in pharmacy. The esteemed speaker for the same was Dr. Parizat Elchidan. We have also done a lot of other technical events, such as poster presentation, mind map, argumentative article writing, which will help students to cultivate their technical and presentation skills. Other than this, we have organized awareness activities and interactive events. In the upcoming months, we also plan to do more such technical events, panel discussions, and release our annual newsletter in September 2022. All these things should provide a student with all-round development and leadership training qualities. Today, we have one such excellent opportunity to hear from an expert in drug discovery and precision medicine, Dr. Nimita Limaye. I now call upon our faculty advisor, Dr. Alka Mukne, to introduce our speaker for today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Atharva, and to formally introduce Dr. Nimita Limaye. She leads the Life Sciences R&D Strategy and Technology Program at International Data Corporation, providing research-based advisory and consulting services as well as market analysis. With over 2 decades of life sciences leadership experience across pharma, CROs, life science tech consulting companies, Nimita is an executive business leader and addresses aspects such as the role of digital transformation in discovery research, precision medicine, decentralized clinical trials, digital ecosystems, and so on. Nimita has served as a mentor for startups in the Mass Bio Digital Health Initiative. She's also served as past chair of the SCDM board and is the current chair of the DIA Global Medical Writing Community. A much in demand speaker, Nimita has chaired several conferences, led industry roundtables, given keynote talks, led panel discussions, and has authored over 70 publications or white papers, which include a couple of them, include the ones with Pharma Times. That's how I have known Nimita. So pleasure to have you, Nimita, address our students, help them out, talk on this very important topic on role of technology in precision medicine. It's going to be a tremendous learning experience for our students. And once again, thank you for making it despite your busy schedule. So over to you, Nimita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alka. It was so kind of you to invite me over here. It's a privilege to be here and to address this forum. Um, you know, it's something that should be a lot of fun, and a lot. I hope it should also be really interesting and helpful to your team. So I think we go back a long way, and I look forward, to further discussions. So, would you like me to share screen now?
If you are able to do, I think you can do it. Otherwise, if there are any issues from your end, probably students would.
Whatever. I mean, I can share screen, not a problem. Just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we are able to.
Okay, super. So once again, good evening, everyone. And I can get started right now, right? Or do you
Yeah,
want me
you
to
can
wait?
start. You can start. I think you maybe you can take it in slideshow mode or something.
Sure. Then I won't see the chat or anything. That'll be the problem. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Um, Perfect. So, good evening, everyone. I'm assuming that everyone who's joined is from India. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session on how technology is transforming drug discovery and fueling a precision medicine strategy. Um, and, okay. Okay. So, when we're talking about technology transforming drug discovery, I think there is so much that's happening right now. This is one of the hottest areas. There's a tagline that I tell my son, and that is the tagline for 2022 is stay fascinated. And I really hope to walk you through various perspectives through this presentation. This is the standard disclaimer. The views shared in this presentation are my own. And I would start with, yesterday I was working on my slides and there was the game that we were going to be watching the game of the Celtics. And my son asked me, says, "Hey, what are you doing? Aren't you going to come?" I said, "No, I'm working on my slides." And this was his reaction. "What? On a Saturday? You're going to have a presentation on a Saturday?" And he asked me another question: who's going to sit through a 40-minute presentation on a Saturday? So I really hope that when you watch this presentation, this is not going to be how you're feeling. I hope to make it more engaging and interactive. And, I hope you enjoy this session because this is really a very interesting space. So, coming to precision medicine, what is precision medicine really? And if you look at the FDA definition, precision medicine, sometimes known as personalized medicine, is an innovative approach to tailoring disease prevention and treatment that takes into account differences in people's genes, environments, and lifestyles. So I think that calls out a couple of things. The first is that we're not talking only about genes, it's not just genomics. Also, sometimes known as personalized medicine. I think in the earlier perspective was calling it personalized medicine, but as we know, um, the therapies are not being developed for a single individual largely because that is not something that's a cost effective solution, but for specific niche cohorts. And it is certainly growing. It's growing very rapidly. If you look at the precision medicine market, it is set to exceed $96 billion by 2024 as per various reports, with a CAGR of almost 11%. And which is the key therapeutic area, that's oncology, again with a similar CAGR. So precision medicine is growing. The way it's happening is, people are looking for solutions that are going to work for them. I think, you are all experts from BCP. So as you would know very well, drugs have side effects, especially if you look at cancer. The therapies are phenomenally exorbitantly expensive, plus the side effects can be significant. Can you have a solution that is designed to work for you? And with that, so yes, a big focus of it is around the human genome. And the Human Genome Project, as you know, was completed in 2003, but yet not the entire genome was sequenced. 92% of it was sequenced. Um, and then just this very year, very recently, the Telomere to Telomere Consortium, T2T, actually presented a complete 3.055 billion base pair sequence of the human genome. Now, what was remaining was really large segments of repeat DNA. And I love this statement by Miga, who is, a biologist who's working on this project. I am in love with repeats because significant insights can still be drawn from the repeat DNA, whether it's centromeric DNA or satellite DNA, or whether you're looking at transposons. But a lot of information still can be extracted. And we are only today are we really reaching that point of time when you can really look at the entire human genome and try to understand why each one of us respond differently to different drugs. And so DNA has to be sequenced, and there are various companies which are in this space. And this is just a quick snapshot of some of the key players that are here. From, Illumina is one of the top players. Oxford Nanopore is big, as is Specific Biosciences, and all of the other companies that are listed over here as well. And I think you also have a lot of focus. People are now interested in finding out, just, going and getting their DNA sequenced and finding out, what is the likelihood of they developing a certain disease, and so on. But you also have situations like ancestry.com, which kind of closed down, ancestry health, uh, where they were actually providing you with health reports to focus instead on family lineage. So and again, you have short read sequencing and long read sequencing companies like Pacific Biosciences and Oxford Nanopore, for example, focusing on long read sequencing. So in the short read sequencing, just to put it simply, you're really snipping DNA into smaller fragments and then trying to sequence it and then put it together in context with an actual genome. So the chances of missing out critical pieces are much higher than with long read sequencing. The challenge with long read sequencing is was really expensive, and the other excuse me, the other side of it also is not only the cost, but also the fact that the accuracy was not very high. That is changing rapidly, and that's where we're seeing a lot of shift today. A, a question for you is: have you sequenced your genome? I remember many years ago, not many years ago, actually, a couple of years ago, I was in India and I was chairing s- uh, some some uh, some panel discussion, and there was this person, one of the speakers, and I asked them, "So have you sequenced your genome?" And this person said, "Yes, I did, but I sequenced it, but I never went back and tried to find out what that meant." So um, and I was like, okay, why not? Because the person said, oh, I didn't want to because I was too scared to find out what the consequences might be. So there are a lot of aspects to this in terms of, yes, deciphering what this has to say, and then how are you willing to deal with it as well. So there's been a clear transition from blockbusters to a focus on precision medicine. You were talking of drugs, whether you're talking of Lipitor or other drugs which were working for the masses, and now you're talking of a much deeper drill down, much more fine-tuned niche market segments, um, towards a precision medicine strategy, because a lot of diseases already have therapies, and the untapped areas are really things like rare diseases. um, there's a growing amount of lifestyle disorders. Look at the population, especially, for example, if you look at the US, significant percentage of the population is really an elderly population now. So how are you dealing with those lifestyle diseases or aging population, and so on. And what you're seeing is an unprecedented growth of cell and gene therapies. So the CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate for cell and gene therapies, is in double digits right now. Over 50%, half of the life sciences companies are planning to invest in cell and gene therapies in the near future. Awesome. Over 1,200 trials are already underway, but only about 20 products have been approved. So why is that the case? So, well, when you're looking at cell and gene therapies, and you can talk of CAR T cell therapy and other things, the challenge that is there is it's complex, not only from the perspective of developing the therapy itself, but also from a perspective of administering it. Because it's normally autologous, you're extracting the cells from the patient. You have to modify the gene, you have to put it back in the patient. Sounds very simple, but it isn't quite as simple. There are complex supply chain issues. There are um, other compliance issues which make it very, very tricky to successfully implement this. Another perspective where you're seeing growth is the growth of integrated omics platforms to drive a precision medicine strategy. Um, I think there's a very clear perspective that it is not just about genomics, but it is about multiomics. So whether it is genomics, transcriptomics, phenomics, proteomics, and so on. So really looking at all of that, and even me moving beyond just the omics to really looking at the longitudinal patient health record, trying to understand the patient from an end-to-end perspective. Lot more of focus on real-world data as well. So cell and gene therapies, yes, they are really expensive. And I'd just like to share a few examples with you on some of the skyrocketing prices that we see for cell and gene therapies. They're ultra rare, but also ultra pricey. So, and I mean, they're really applying to ultra rare diseases. The most expensive drug ever is Zolgensma, the Novartis product for spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. What's the price of this drug? $2.15 million. It was approved in 2019. Excuse me. That is not a small sum. How are you going to make this accessible to patients, right? And the other interesting part, I think, for the EMA approval, European Medicines Agency, e- even some level of real world evidence was used to support the approval. So prices are skyrocketing. Yes, Zolgensma is supposed to be a one-time administration, but it is still phenomenal. Let's look at Zokinvy. Zokinvy is used for treating progeria. Progeria is, as you may be aware, I can't recall the name of that movie just now, but there was, I think, this movie in which, if I recall correctly, and many of you, since you're all from India, you could probably recall Amitabh Bachchan acted in one of those movies where he had progeria, where you're aging at a very young age. The cost of this treatment is over $1 million per year, approved in 2020. What's even more interesting is that approval of such an expensive drug was based on data from 62 patients in two single arm clinical trials. Now, they were compared with untreated patients from a separate history study. Again, this drug is expensive, but it's not really um, treating the disease. It's not curing the disease. It's just increasing survival by 2.5 years. So I think these are some things that kind of strike you, right? Or Danielza, YMAB Therapeutics, over $1 million, again approved in 2020 for neuroblastoma on the bone. And Kimtrack, Immunocore, it's close to $1 million. It's for uveal melanoma, just approved in 2022 for a form of eye cancer. And Myelet, it's an AstraZeneca product for lipodystrophy. It's again close to $1 million. And I'm sure there are many more. I just listed what were considered to be amongst the top 5 most expensive drugs over here. Um, and a thing that I'd like to call out also over here is you're seeing a focus on value-based pricing. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So, what do you really mean by that? I think that has more of a US-centric focus. But what I'm just trying to say is, it's not linked to just the price of the drug, as in you're purchasing the drug, but it's being linked to clinical outcomes. So, if insurance is going to pay so much, or if anyone is going to pay so much for a certain drug, to put it simply, there has to be proven clinical outcome. So you're seeing an increasing focus. Value-based pricing is still in its early days. It's not. It will take time to get established. But if there's one area where I see it getting applied, it's around cell and gene therapies. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so let's look at the costs. We saw the cost of cell and gene therapies is skyrocketing. Let's look at the cost of sequencing. The cost of genome sequencing has followed Moore's law, the computer thing that as the speed of compute increases, the cost of compute will decrease. It's been pretty much the same for genome sequencing, where you're talking of a price tag of $2.7 billion. And now you're talking of something as low as $300 to get your genome sequenced. What about the cost of bringing a drug to the market? Look at this was by an old report by Tufts. And they reported a price tag of $2.9 billion for bringing a drug to the market. with average costs around $1.5 billion, 1.4 billion, and 1/1 billion as time cost. That is the time taken by investors. They have to wait before the drug is actually approved and in the market. And finally, around 300 million for post-approval research. Realistically speaking, can we continue this way? 12 years and $2.9 billion, is that an option anymore? No, it isn't. And we're seeing a strong focus. And another very important thing, I think, is the pandemic. The pandemic proved to the industry, to the life sciences industry, that things need to change and they can change. You saw proof of concept that technology can work, that if you put your head together, you can really bring a drug. You saw vaccines coming to the market in less than 1 year. So there has been a change in mindset, and the 15 largest pharma companies are spending over $133 billion. They spent over $133 billion on R&D in 2021, right? So that is huge. You have 84 novel active substances launched in 2021, which is double the number launched 5 years ago. Interestingly, in the US, 60% of those that were launched were first in class. Let's look at emerging biopharma, where basically revenues are just less than $500 million and R&D investment is less than 200, and they account for 2/3 of the R&D pipeline. That's really where you're seeing a big boom in kind of the biotechs, which are fueling innovation. Notably, China is representing 17% of the emerging biopharmas. It was just, I think, around 4 or 5% a few years ago. So it's growing very fast. Again, like I mentioned, precision medicine, these are still early days, but oncology is leading the way. So 40% of the pipeline is represented by oncology. You're looking at 800 next gen biotherapeutics. And by next gen biotherapeutics coming up, I'm referring to CAR T, cell therapy, gene editing, and so on. Talking of CAR T cell therapy, the success rate is still low, just 30 to 40% for lasting remission, right? So we're still in early days. It's not completely, we're getting there. And since 2018, 6 CAR T cell therapies have been approved by the FDA. Kymriah was the first one approved by the FDA. It's a Novartis product for acute lymphoblastic lymphoma, and all the CAR T cell therapies that were approved were for blood cancers. Let's for a moment skip over to the development side of R&D. And in 2021, 5,500 new clinical trials were reported to start, which was 14% over 2020. So everyone was like, okay, the pandemic came, clinical trials came to a halt, everything stood still. But realistically, if you look at what happened, this industry stood up and faced the challenge. And the number of new clinical trials is actually going up. A significant percentage of those are of course, related to COVID. So again, very interestingly, in 2021, the net number of trial participants for the first time has exceeded 2 million. This would also be related to really huge COVID-19 studies, Ebola virus studies, and others. But these are interesting things to note. Again, when we're talking about the cost of bringing a drug to the market, um, if you look at this was a study done by the London School of Economics, and from 2009 to 2018, oncology and immunology were the most expensive drugs to bring to the market with over $2.7 billion. Whereas if you look at anti-infectives and go down the path to dermatology, the costs are going significantly down. But the average cost of drug development was $1.3 billion. And for oncology and immunomodulatory drugs, it was the average cost was $4.5 billion. Again, this is telling us that things need to change. We have to leverage technology to drive solutions. And so, yes, it's a battle for the life sciences industry as well. You want to improve clinical outcomes. You really want to come out with innovative drugs, and you want to scale innovation. We just agreed that you cannot spend 12 years and that amount of money to get a drug to the market. So you have to leverage technology. So data and technology are really transforming drug discovery. And I'm going to kind of talk about 4 things. There are many, but I'm going to talk about 4, focusing on real world data, AI driven drug discovery and transformer models to scale innovation, federated learning models to fuel co-innovation, and dipping into the metaverse. Yes, even the metaverse is coming into play. The first one was real world evidence. And you can see a significantly increased regulatory focus on real world evidence. And what is real world evidence? We'll come to that. But as you may be aware, data is exploding. If you just look at it, the reality right now, I'm sure many of you are wearing smartwatches, Fitbits, or whatever you may. Um, Many clinical trials today are using, the moment you say decentralized, you and patients are going to be at home, and today significant number of trials are decentralized. With that comes the fact that you have to monitor patients remotely. So you're seeing an increased use of wearables and sensors, and data is flowing in fast, right? Also, look at the number of genomes that are being analyzed. 38 million in 2020. The number is expected to be close to double by 2025. 52 million. Right, wonderful. We've scaled genome sequencing. You need to scale compute power. You need to scale infrastructure. You need to scale data storage. We also saw that it's not just genomics; it's multiomics. IDC, that's my company, and we're a top tier technology focused market research and advisory firm. As per its Global Data Sphere report of 2022, the world will have about 179.62 zettabytes of data by 2025. But out of this huge, excuse me, huge bulk of data that the world will have, less than 5% of it will be analyzable. So something needs to change. Again, why are we collecting the data if we can't analyze it? And so we need to leverage not only clinical trial data, because that is the data that's collected in a controlled environment, but also real world data. And real world data, what is it? It's really clinical trial data, um, but much more than that. So therapeutic and patient reported data. This is, claims and billing data. Clinical trial data is really not the real world data. It's in addition to that is real world data. It's therapeutic and patient reported data, claims and billing data, product and disease registries, EHRs, claims, billings, data from sensors and mobile devices. So it's a lot of data really in addition to clinical trial data. So real world evidence is the evidence that you're generating from real world data. So why is this real world data or real world evidence so important? Because you really want to know how do drugs operate in the real world, not just within a controlled environment. Look at the FDA's regulatory focus. There were three or four regulatory guidances that were issued in the recent past. One was one was around how real world data and real world evidence or RWE are being used to support decision making. In November 21, regulatory decision making. What are the data standards that you need? October 21. How do you access EHRs and medical claims data to support regulatory decision making? September 21. So, and the FDA actually published an analysis of 90 examples of real world evidence used to support regulatory decisions on medical devices. I think, if I recall correctly, there were about 118 um, cases where real world data was involved in supporting regulatory decisions overall. So, let's not really look only at the numbers, but what I'm trying to call out over here is the increased focus from an FDA perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and it's not just the FDA. You'll see it from EMA, European Medicines Agency, as well, on leveraging real world data. There are multiple initiatives ongoing over there, like European Health Data Evidence Network and Darwin, on focusing on this. Let's take a few examples. The FDA approved Prograf, which is an Astellas product for to prevent organ rejection on a non-interventional study providing RWE. So a drug was approved based on a non-interventional study using real-world evidence. Pfizer leveraged RWE to drive label expansion for Ibrance, which is basically for treating HER2 negative breast cancer in women, to find that it can also be used to treat men. And yes, men also can develop breast cancer. And then Novartis had its heart disease drug canakinumab, which was being where they found that it wasn't really working very well for that. But they studied the data of the 10,000 patients that they had gathered, and then they looked deeper and they found that it actually could work well for lung cancer. So you can get drugs approved. Label expansion is another thing that you can look at, drug repurposing, drug repositioning, and so on. So, is AI driven drug discovery living up to the hype? A lot of the industry says, oh, yeah, right. AI, fancy word, everyone's talking about it. Does it really work? Um, and some interesting statistics, IDC, as per IDC data, we found that almost half of life sciences companies are planning to increase their spend on, AI to fuel drug discovery. And 70% are going to be focusing on precision medicine and genomics. Another report by BCG says third-party investment in AI-enabled drug discovery is being doubling annually in the past 5 years. So it has gone from 2.4 billion in 2020 and is expected to reach 5 billion by the end of 2021. So there is an industry focus on leveraging this opportunity. And I would like to share a few very interesting examples, actually. And I recently published a report on this, but just a few of the highlights. Let's look at Exantia. It's building out AI designed drugs, and it developed one for immuno-oncology in just 8 months, one for Alzheimer's. Both of these were developed in collaboration with Sumitomo, Nippon Pharma, right? So immuno-oncology and Alzheimer's. The one for immuno-oncology came out in just 8 months, and for advanced solid tumors in collaboration with Evertech. What is more interesting is not only were these drugs designed, but they've already entered clinical trials. So that says something. Benevolent AI. It's using knowledge graphs. So AI-powered knowledge graphs. So what are knowledge graphs? Basically, that's a technology which is driving interconnectivity between multiple data points, so to speak, as well as scientific literature. So the ability to connect the dots, let's put it that way, right? And in partnership with Lilly, they found out that baricitinib, which is usually used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, could actually have and actually had anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties, and it received an EUA to treat COVID. Um, then in silico medicine. In silico medicine is it has its own pharma.ai drug discovery suite, and it is using generative tensorial reinforcement learning, or gentle, but basically it's like two opponents challenging each other. Excuse me, I'm sorry, excuse me. But never mind going into that. Basically, it's leveraging deep learning algorithms. It identified a new target for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis in 21 days and validated that in another 25 days. And so this drug, it's an AI designed drug, has entered clinical trials in less than 18 months. Think back of what we were doing before. Think back of what is happening now. If these are things that are going to work, this is going to change the future. It's going to change the future in terms of the speed to innovation. It's going to change the future in terms of costs. This is going to be transformational. Recursion is a clinical stage biotech. They've leveraged machine learning to phenomics. So they're looking at the phenomaps of human cellular biology. So it's not just the genomics part of it, but the expression part of it, as you know. And Roche and Genentech have committed $12 billion to use the Recursion OS to advance therapies across 40 programs in areas such as neurosciences and an oncology indication. Um, so a lot happening in this space. Why are my slides not moving? Okay, right. And then coming to Transformers, I'm sure you've all played or seen Transformers as kids. What are Transformers when it comes to life sciences? Basically, for example, they developed by like NVIDIA, right? You must have heard of NVIDIA GPUs. And these transformers make self-supervised learning possible. To quote the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, transformers made self-supervised learning possible and AI jumped to warp speed. What is the important thing over here? Like everyone says machine learning, but for machine learning, you need labeled data sets, right? Do you have that volume of data? You need domain specific labeled data sets. And Only then will the algorithms get trained and get the required intelligence. Do you have those volumes of data? If you don't, what do you do? So, in this model, basically, it has two steps of learning. So, the first step is unsupervised learning, where it's going to get trained on much larger non-specific data sets, and then supervised learning where it gets trained on a much smaller volume of specific domain-specific data sets. So that is a way of kind of dealing with that challenge. And another side to it also is it uses parallel processing, so the speed is much, much higher. And so, for example, NVIDIA worked with AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca's drug discovery model was called Mega Malbart. So AstraZeneca's Malbar transformer model and NVIDIA's Megatron framework, basically these are using this supercomputing capability to interpret relationships between atoms. And then another interesting example, moving on, is Google acquired DeepMind Technologies and in 2014, and they developed something called AlphaFold, which is again using machine learning to predict the folding structure, the structure of proteins, only based on the amino acid sequence. Now, you can imagine how complex it is to actually visualize um, the 3D structure of a protein without without actually having more insights, and it actually challenged. There was a competition called CAST, critical aspect for structure prediction, I think, where it went against, I think, over 100 other participants, and it found that the level of accuracy was really high and comparable to X-ray crystallography. And the next one is about bringing genetic diagnosis to the point of care. We all say sequencing, awesome. But what does that mean for the patient? And can you actually save patients' lives? And this is a really interesting example of the Stanford School of Medicine, which leveraged NVIDIA's GPUs, graphic processing units, and Oxford Nanopore's Promethean flow cells. Oxford Nanopore, as I told you, was about long read sequencing, as well as NVIDIA's Clara Parabricks. Forget about all of that, but basically they managed to complete genome sequencing in 5 hours and 2 minutes. And this set a new Guinness World Record for the fastest DNA sequencing ever. Um, and an interesting point was they would sequence the genomes of 12 patients. Notably, they detected genetic diseases in 5 patients, and the diagnosis rate was 12% higher than the existing conventional diagnosis rates. More importantly, there was a 13-year-old boy from Oregon who was, supposedly having myocarditis, and he had been flown to Stanford, and they were trying to find out whether this was, whether it was triggered by some viral condition or whether it was a genetic condition. Because the viral condition, it could be reversed. The genetic condition could not be as simply reversed if it was caused by a genetic mutation. Because of the speed with which they could actually sequence this, the boy, it was diagnosed that his condition was caused by a genetic mutation, and he received a heart transplant within 21 days. So it literally was bringing genetic diagnosis right to the point of care. That is what really needs to happen. Now let's look at federated learning models. And when we're talking about federated learning, so I just mentioned a little while ago that you need to look at data in large volumes if you want to train machine learning algorithms. And not many pharma companies have those volumes of data that are required to support that. So, and the other thing is, okay, so why don't we all share our data, right? There's so many big pharma companies, let's exchange data. But as we all know, data is my IP. Nobody wants to share their data. It's their intellectual property. So what can we do? So the federated learning model is taking the learning to the data instead of the data to the trading. So essentially, and the reason I put this visual over here is somebody in an interview asked me, how would you explain what's federated learning to a layman? And I was like thinking, and I said, it's actually like a honeybee which goes and dips into multiple flowers and sips nectar. Same way the machine learning algorithms are dipping into the data stays with the pharma company. The algorithm goes and kind of dips into the different data sets, picks up some learning, and goes back to a central place. Just try to visualize it that way, with enhanced learning, which can now go back and give that wisdom to all the different players. So your data is not moving out of your storage or repository, but the machine learning algorithm is coming to your data, learning from it, adjusting weights, and then going back, and then that algorithm shares the intelligence across all players. So intelligence is growing without moving the data. Interesting examples is one is Terra, which was developed by Verily Life Sciences and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. They've provided open access to federated ecosystem of genomics and other omics data, and partnered with Microsoft, which will actually provide the cloud infra and data and AI. And then you have machine learning ledger orchestration for drug discovery, or MELODY. This involves the top, and it's being supported by the European consortium, involves the top 10 big pharmas are partnering on this to train annotated data. They're training on annotated data over 10 million chemical compounds. They're going to leverage the world's largest collaborative drug compound data set for training machine learning algorithms without actually putting any of their own data at risk. So and we are seeing at IDC that there is a significant growth in such models of, you're seeing digital ecosystems, you're seeing companies come together to fuel co-innovation, which was not really a thing of the past, and that's being enabled by federated learning. Coming to the metaverse and drug discovery, that is virtually becoming a reality. I love punning on that word, but you're talking of augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, a lot of different things, but it is actually being used. There are companies like Nanome or InVirtu Data Solutions and others which are actually trying to represent data in a 3D space. And you can actually wear the headset and try to move the molecules around and try to visualize how is the molecule binding to the target, and so on. It's a very fascinating experience. They're trying to, you can figure out the 3D shapes of molecules, try to look at gaining really critical insights. It's creating much more data rich views, being used to optimize drug design. And more interestingly, more than a third of the industry is using AR/VR solutions to visualize genomic data. So where are we today? There is a need for rapidly scalable solution to develop a precision medicine strategy to treat things like chronic disease, rare diseases, and lifestyle disorders. I do believe we are transitioning from blockbusters to precision therapies. Yes, these are early days. Realistically, we are not there yet. It's happening fast, but we are getting there. And as we are building out um, um, this strategy, the investment in genomic data infrastructure and compute strategy needs to grow in parallel. That's basically what it was. And yes, thank you very much for a patient hearing. And either go back to sleep. I'm sorry, I put that more from a US context, or go and party because it's Saturday evening for you. Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much, Limita, for that absolutely fascinating journey through what is actually happening in the life sciences industry. All the jargon of AI and machine learning and 3D data constructs and what have you, which maybe till a few decades back were more like science fiction.
Yes.
It's there here, it's there at our doorsteps, it's a reality. And I'm sure this was a very fascinating sort of um, sojourn or eye opener, maybe into how the drug discovery industry is adapting to these rapid technological advances. So, so thank
Thank
you
you so
again,
much,
and
Dr.
I
Alka.
think we'll throw it open to our students for questions or whatever they would want to ask.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful session. I now request all the attendees to put their questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hands. We'll unmute you.
Okay. Are there any questions? Otherwise, I have a question for the audience.
So I think you shoot your question and then maybe we'll see whether they have questions.
Okay, my question is, how many of you have actually got your genome sequenced? Can anyone respond in the chat, say yes or no? Okay,
Looks like, yeah, looks like
okay,
people have.
somebody has asked a question in the chat.
There's a
Got
question
to
here.
see. What about
Yashida, can you please read out
Yes,
the
ma'am. So the question is from Lay Passer. What about economically and technologically weak nations? How can they work on this technology-based drug discovery?
I think that's a good question. It's a valid question, but I would also say that things are changing very rapidly. Um, and also, like if I just give you the example of, I gave you the example of Melody, right? Digital ecosystems, where you're talking of federated learning. While there is a complexity that's involved, at the same time, I think the world is kind of opening up, so to speak. So some of it may, like, for example, if you're looking at say leveraging the metaverse, for countries like who have those limitations, that may be a little complicated. But again, that is not. I don't want to say that's not game changing. That is game changing in the way you visualize the data, but it's not a roadblock. I can tell you when I was sitting with the headset and trying to move molecules around, and I found it so fascinating. And the person was like, "Okay, I'll show you this," and I was like, "Okay, if I continue, I'm not going to leave." Because it was totally fascinating. But that is an experience. The ability to actually leverage machine learning and AI for a lot of these things is not, I think, out of the league of many countries. Many countries, let's take India, for example, and I do not really include India in technologically or economically weak nation today. I would say India is very much up there and is a very key player. IT and India go together, I would say.
Mhm.
So, right, I think India has been a leader in this space. So, the only thing that's critical is to be able to connect the dots between science and technology. And I mean, my job is to speak to a lot of the key technology companies in the industry, and I speak also to a lot of technology companies from India as well. And I can tell you that a lot of companies are out there trying to do this stuff and develop this stuff, and it's evolving. So, I mean, that's my response to that. And I don't see that as a challenge now. Are
Ma'am,
there
there's
more questions?
another question from Aditya Shinde. How can we as early BPharm students can work to gain the required information and skills to delve into this entire world of technological enhancement in the drug delivery precision?
Okay, good question, Aditya. So I would just say this, that realistically speaking, irrespective of which domain you are in, whether you are in pharma or you're in any other industry, today, technology has become a part of one's DNA. Not so to speak of the DNA that I was talking about earlier, but that's a skill that you have to have. Realistically speaking, everything is going to go tech. Uh, you know, and you have to have a combination of skills of your domain skills as well as technology skills. So depending, you cannot obviously acquire all of these skills. It depends on which area I spoke about. I spoke about different areas, like for example real world data. You could look at going into areas such as data sciences, right? You could become a data scientist. And again, the other thing I'd say is today people are really hopping over very fast. What do I mean by hopping over? So I like for example, I might have a certain qualification, but how do I move that across and connect the dots? You are not restricted in any way. So you have people who are computer scientists who are moving into something completely different. You have so many people who are from life sciences who are doing multiple and diverse things. So whether it is like, like I said, becoming a data scientist, or you could acquire skills in If you're interested in something like the metaverse, you could acquire skills in say things like virtual reality, which is really becoming a game changer in a way on its own, or become a data analyst. Really, it's at the end of the day of trying to figure out. You need both. You need the ability to or three, I should say. You need to really understand the science. You need to understand how to look at data, and you need to leverage technology. And if you put these three skills together, I think you would be in a very powerful position.
Right, Nimita. If I could just add to what you just said, uh, I think gone are those days where you were restricted to your core or your main domain, and you excel there, and that was the be all and end all of things. That's today technology is what is driving everything, and probably as it is said, maybe a few years down the line, Google and Apple's would be the leading pharma companies or the life science companies, and not Pfizer or Abbott. Those days are
Well,
not
and
far.
great points. I'm sure Pfizer and Abbott won't like to hear that, but but yes, I think you bring up an excellent point. And even if you look at companies like Novartis, I think what did their CEO say? Novartis called the week, if I recall correctly, they call themselves a human data sciences company. Have you ever seen a pharma company rebranding itself that way? Novartis is partnered with Microsoft to bring AI to the desk of every researcher. We talk about things like data democratization. You're also talking about AI democratization. You're talking today about things like data citizens. What is really a data citizen? This is nice terminology, but what do we mean when we say that? It is about allowing the end user, like, I shouldn't be dependent on everything that I want for to go to IT for that. Can I have access to that data? Can I figure out things? You're talking, I was speaking to another company, and they're talking about conversational AI. So, yeah, we all heard about. I'm not talking about chatbots. It's about leveraging it at analytics at a drug discovery stage. So, can I look at my computer, just look at my computer, and say, hey, uh, find out this, how this data maps to so and so, or how is the what are the molecules? Just looking at a computer and having analytics. That is self-service. I am not dependent on IT. I'm not dependent on anyone else. I can get what I want at my fingertips. That's how the world is going to change today. So you brought up a great point.
So Nimita, I have a question before. There are a couple of questions from students, but maybe if
Sure.
I can jump the queue and put something across.
Sure.
So how are universities? So if you look at the Indian universities, uh, you don't. There isn't much of the scope of moving across your main domain and picking up subjects like, say, machine learning or AI or any of those. For if you look at the life science studies here. So how does it work in universities in maybe United States? Are students having the opportunity of getting skill sets across domains and see that it works to their best?
Excellent question, and I think the answer is yes. That is the really interesting thing, is that there's a lot more of, should I say, fungibility there, or flexibility to move across. You could be in a certain domain. You could be pursuing like biomedical engineering, and then you could switch over to something else very easily. So there is that flexibility. There's also a lot more of flexibility, I think, in the courses that you pick up. So for example, when my son was doing his undergrad, he was doing it in computer engineering, computer sciences. And I think the first option that he had was, did he want to study psychology and this thing? And I remember both of us looking at each other, where did that come into computer sciences, right? So it's actually good because you have that option to pick up different things, get the feel of the sense of what is working for you, what really interests you, or to build on additional courses. And I think that is something that we should really adopt, to be honest. It's that skill, like, hey, I am very interested in pharmacology, but I also want to develop maybe skills in machine learning, or data sciences, or some kind of programming. That should be an option that should be offered. I think that was a great point.
Yeah, Yashita, maybe you can take up some of the questions in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there's a question from Harshal. Nivida will be using TSME's 5 nanometer chipset for their GPUs, but as we progress in the future, we are moving forward towards the quantum computing as we push the limits of the fabrication process. How will we bring quantum computing to the drug discovery?
Thank you, Yashita, and thanks, Harshal. Yes, NVIDIA, I think, is playing a critical role, and it is absolutely transformational. I think in the speed it is bringing to the table. I spoke to you about transformer models. NVIDIA has its own Clara drug discovery platform as well. Quantum computing is definitely happening in the space of drug discovery, and there are multiple companies that are now developing capabilities to hyperscale the speed of drug discovery. So I think that's definitely something that's happening right now and is the future.
Uh, okay, ma'am. So next question is from Sanidhi. How can someone from a non-technology background, contribute to the technological aspects of a drug discovery process?
Thanks again, Yashita. And Sanadi, it's a good question. There are two things. If you're from a non tech background and you want to contribute to the technological aspects of a drug discovery process, there are two things that you can do. One is you're a subject matter expert in your domain. Technology cannot operate without science in this space. So yes, you bring in the subject matter expertise. Both of these have to talk to each other to make it work. So that could be one side of it. Um, the other side of it, of course, is you acquire some of the technological skills and contribute to it that way. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, ma'am. And next question is from Chinmay. Are there any organizations that provide student resources in the case of technology in healthcare?
Organization that provides student resources in the case of technology in healthcare. I am not sure I have an answer to that question, Chinmay, but I can only say that a lot of companies, a lot of companies are recruiting young. I'm sure, Alka, you will agree that the whole world is facing a recruitment challenge right now. Uh,
Yes.
it is right. I mean, I think the biggest example I can speak in the US alone is that, like, I think 25% of the people resigned last year of the population. I think people, it's like people experience the freedom, the convenience of work from home, etc. And then they were like, okay, this is it. This is how I want to operate. And, if you want to give me the job, give it to me. Otherwise, I'm walking. And people are doing that. And so finding talent has been challenging. And in IT, which is a very rapidly growing space, especially life sciences capabilities, where you have someone who comes in with the combination of skills of IT and life sciences, pharma, is a very valued resource. So if you can come in with that combo of skills, you would be in demand. So what a lot of these companies are doing is they're hiring young and training them. They're also going to second tier cities to hire. I did hear, for example, Infosys talking about how they are planning to scale up their recruitment really, really rapidly. I know, for example, that AWS is hiring very, very fast, Amazon Web Services. And and these are just two companies that I'm mentioning. I'm sure there are a ton of those out there which are looking for skilled talent. So the thing to do over here is, I would say, to be competitive in this world today, you should develop some level of tech skills as well and complement those with your core scientific skills. That is a very valuable combination to have. You don't necessarily, when I say tech skills, you don't necessarily have to become a programmer. Not all of us are set up to that. Not all of us want to do that. But at the very least, you should understand the play of technology. So if you're coming in, for example, as a subject matter expert, it is no use if you just understand the science but don't know how it can be applied in tech. Where is tech headed? So, for
True.
example, the presentation, I think it was really great initiative by Dr. Alka Mukne to kind of lead such conversations and expose the students to all of this, because you should be aware of where it can be applied. You should be aware of where technology is changing. And I'm sure you all are already considering some of the last, sessions that you shared that you've had. So I thought I saw something about pharma and AI and others. But I just say build those skills, develop that understanding. Whether you want to go into a deeper dive in technology, that's your call. You could dabble in it, see if that interests you. If not, at least understand the landscape. But definitely understand the landscape at the very least. Okay,
Thank
there's
you,
another
ma'am.
question.
That's it.
So, apologies for that, ma'am. Could you please elaborate on the technology skills like coding or programming languages or the other sort of the best place to start? Okay, the best place to start. It's a tough one.
So,
Uh,
Nimita, you've ignited a lot of, I would say, passion and curiosity in students, and they really are looking at how is it that they are able to, uh, be better prepared and be better equipped.
well, I would say do a couple of things. One is, I guess all of them are students, so all of you are studying. So you could probably do additional internships on the side. Many of the companies are offering internships for students. Go get that opportunity, get that exposure, see what is happening, learn on the side. In addition, you can upskill in your free time. I don't know how much of work you give them on their coursework, but if you have extra hours, go and acquire additional IT skills, like do a course in machine learning or something like that, and build those capabilities so that you understand what's going on. So I mean, at a high level, that's what I can say right now, whether it's Python or whether it is, or other languages or even R or others. Build those skills. Yeah. I want to get my genome sequenced. How do I do that? Okay, so I listed a bunch of companies out there. I believe in India, you also have, I think, genomepatrika.com, and then there's mapmygenome.com, and I don't know how many more, but there are many companies out there. And in addition, as I've listed some, you could go out there and get your genome sequenced. I don't believe it is terribly expensive, but I think what you should think about before you get your genome sequenced is why do you want to get it sequenced, right? Give some thought to that, because you're putting money on the table. Make sure that you're welcome. Make sure that you have it clear in your mind that is the company providing you with a health report or not, because just getting your genome sequenced is not of no value. Otherwise, you need to go to a genetic counselor or to someone who can interpret that report and tell you what to do. And finally, are you going to, like, if you find out, say, hey, I'm a very high likelihood of getting Alzheimer's, then you should not just just crash. You should be prepared that for consequences as well. Maybe it's something good that you find out, hopefully, but just be prepared psychologically for potential insights and how will you deal with those. Okay. Uh, any other questions?
So, are there any other questions or from students?
I don't think so.
So, Nimita, thank you so much. That was an absolutely wonderful session. We enjoyed it. It was very informative. There was so much of learning, and definitely a lot of food for thought for our students. Um, and maybe whatever questions they had about what they should do to equip themselves, and you've answered them and addressed them so well. I'm sure that's going to be working good for our students. So,
Thank you so
thank you
much,
so much.
Dr. Alka. And I
Thank you
hope
so much.
none of the students are cursing me for spoiling this Saturday evening.
No, they're not. They're not. In fact, we are sorry we disturbed you on a Saturday
Oh,
morning. We've
that's
woken
fine.
you up very early and come and talk to us.
That's fine.
So,
That's fine. All right. Thank you once again.
yeah,
Thank you
yes.
all for your patience. And thank you so much, Dr. Alka. Thank you, Yashita.
Thank you, Nimita, for making it despite your extremely busy schedule.
Not at all. My pleasure entirely. Take care. Bye.
Nimita, just a minute. There's something.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, as a token of appreciation and gratitude, instead of a conventional memento, we planted a medicinal plant in our college, Mentas Picata. which is commonly known as pudina. And here's a short video of it as well.
That's done on your behalf. Whenever you plan to come down to Mumbai, you can have a look.
Oh, that is so nice. That is really, really sweet. Thank you so much. And by the way, I absolutely love pudina or mint. My husband says instead of putting mint on the food, I put food on the mint.
Food in.
I love it so much. So thank you very much for the very sweet gesture. Appreciate it.
Hello all. Today on behalf of our honorable speaker Dr. Nimita Limaye, we hereby plant Menthus spicata. Menthus spicata has volatile oils and it is used for GI disorders and a very potent antispasmodic agent.
Thank you so much. That was such a sweet gesture. And I think much better than any other memento that I could have received.
So
Thank
we're
you
going
very,
to take
very
good
much.
care of it. And whenever you're planning your Mumbai visit, do drop in at BCP, look at how your Menthas Picata is doing. And our
For
students would
sure.
be very happy to meet you in person. I would be very
Same
happy.
here. Same here. Thank you so much once again. And to all the students for the patience on a Saturday evening. And thank you so much, Ashita and Dr. Alka. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, Nimit.
Take care.
Thank you, ma'am. And it was a wonderful session. I hope you liked the memento. So now I request the Vice Chairperson of BCP AAPS Student Chapter, Divya Jaiswal, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
Yes, Divya, you are.
Yeah. A very good evening to everyone present today. I am Divya Jaiswal here to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the entire chapter. I would like to begin by thanking our chief guest for today, Dr. Nimita Limaye, for her commendable talk. Thank you for your absolute great presence, and it's been a great honor to have you today with us. A massive thanks to the faculty advisor of BCP APA student chapter, Dr. Alka Mukne. Thank you, ma'am, for your resourceful and insightful inputs. I also thank all my BCP APA student chapter office bearers, executive heads, and committee members for working diligently and giving their absolute best for this event. Last but not the least, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone present today and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. I now request everyone to switch on their cameras for a moment to take a quick photograph. Is it done?
It's done.
Yeah. Just a short note, the feedback link is shared in the chat box. Kindly fill that and share your experience with us. Take care and have a nice evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you. Take care,
Nimita. Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Take
Have a
care.
great weekend.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care, Nimita. Bye-bye.